I'm J. Rachel Edidin.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we're the hosts of Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast all about the ins, the outs, and the retcons of comics' greatest superhero soap opera.
We're also the hosts of Jay and Miles Review the X-Men,
which you're watching right now,
where we talk about the X books that come out each week.
Or each 2 weeks for the last several, since there have been a lot of one X-book weeks, so we've combined them. And this week we are fresh off of Rose City Comic Con.
Yes, it was excellent. We got to meet/see again a number of you, and that was super rad. I mean, having you exist on the internet and talk to us is really great, but seeing you in person is, I would argue, even slightly better.
There was a party, and it was amazing, and there was a semi-impromptu viola recital. Someone came as Wolverine with a viola.
That was in one panel of one issue ever that we referenced in, like, the most recent episode.
And
they were on.
And there was a Boom Boom and Dr. Doom couple's costume. And
yeah,
basically, you are all amazing. So we have speaking of that, and we made a new zine, or I made a new zine. It is Jay's book of irrelevant headcanon. It is a collection of entirely story-irrelevant headcanon, cunningly illustrated. And for the first time, speaking of zines, Books with Pictures is going to be carrying both of ours. They will have this. They will have Jay and Miles made a zine about the X-Men, now with an updated title and names and stuff. I spent a lot of time with white acrylic paint and a Sharpie, zine appropriately.
Very high tech.
We should say, actually, by the way, if you are a comics retailer and would like to carry our zines or buttons, drop us a line and we can do that. We're still not doing direct sales outside of conventions, but yeah, we are game for that specifically. Our contact information is on the website.
Indeed.
Now, however, we have 2 weeks worth of comics to review.
Yep, that is September 7th and September 14th. Still just a total of 3 books because Marvel is merciful / there aren't very many X books these days, but we will tell you about each and every one of them
in excruciating detail.
We'll start with last week's book, Uncanny X-Men number 12, written by Cullen Bunn with pencils by Greg Land, inks by Jay Leiston, and colors by David Curiel. So I am pleased to report this is actually a very good issue of Uncanny X-Men.
You know what would have made it better, though? Ken Lashley.
Well, that's true. But I do want to say, so Greg Land is on this. He appears to be sort of the default regular artist for this book. He's come back after Lashley did the Apocalypse Wars arc. And this is the best his art has been in this entire book. Now, it's not going to make a believer of you if you're already really not in favor of Land's work, but I will say he appears to photo reference a lot less, or at least a lot more consistently from character to character. And for me, the art wasn't distracting. It told the story relatively well. And if he can keep this up, I'd be totally okay with him being the regular artist on this book, you know, unto the far future. Yeah,
the consistency is really key to what works here. His Psylocke stays, again, fairly consistent. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think it helps that Psylocke doesn't tend to be a very visually expressive character.
Yeah, her face stays a little bit blank.
Yeah, I think this is a story that's very well suited to his strengths.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, very much in favor of that. That was great to see because Cullen Bunn's writing is almost universally great, and that really comes through. He's got the voice of the characters just down. Like you were saying, Jay, Betsy Braddock is probably the central character of this, and he writes her in a way I really, really enjoy because, you know, we've always seen Betsy as the kind of hard-ass with a slightly, I don't know about, like, you know, nice exterior, but at least a polished exterior. Yes. Yeah. And we get that also, but we get that wonderful British snark that you only see in her occasionally that I think Cy Spurrier freaking nailed. And Bunn's got it here as well. Like, Betsy's a character that cares a great deal about things, but is also easily frustrated by all the nonsense she sees around her. When she's dealing with Magneto, obviously, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, this is a Psylocke who, personality-wise, bridges, I think, a lot of previous incarnations very neatly. So speaking of characters and characterization and nods back, I'm not going to name them, but there's a character from Bunn's Magneto run who I'm really excited to see back here.
Seeing her again, she's a fascinating character. I'm very surprised she's back, and seeing more development from her, especially in a book where it's not just basically, you know, Magneto is the main character, but we have this entire team. Like, I hope she sticks around. And actually, the Hellfire Club in general right now, I kind of like. Of course, you have Sebastian Shaw because you have to.
You don't really have to, but it helps.
You probably should.
You really should.
But Black Tom Cassidy, he's a fun character. People forget that he can be a fun character. You know what he has?
A mustache?
A shillelagh.
Also a fancy mustache.
It's a druid spell. Is fancy mustache a druid spell?
Probably.
Probably. It's like really high level though. But yeah, so it's interesting. And we have some nice nods back to continuity as the existing inner circle of the Hellfire Club talks about, I think, having sent the previous child incarnations to bed without dinner, which is so wonderfully like...
to run and play with all of the other terrible Wunderkind?
I'm pretty sure they're dead.
I assume that someone... I mean, they might be dead, but I assume they'll also come back eventually.
Probably.
Like, that's really not going to stop them. One of them's a Frankenstein, for instance.
But I really appreciate that they do make at least brief reference to the fact that Magneto was the White King of the Hellfire Club.
Yes, he
a long
was.
time
He
ago.
and Storm were co-White King of the Hellfire Club,
Now,
in fact.
They don't mention that. But these nods back to continuity, I'm not saying you have to focus on them, but this is what you do. This is what you do to both reward and not annoy longtime readers when you revisit a plot point that's been addressed before. I mean, they even talk about that time that Magneto and Sebastian Shaw got in a fist fight in the men's room.
They did not get in a fist fight in the men's room.
Well, they got in a yelling
fist fight
match.
afterwards. They got in a yelling match.
Yes. So, it's a solid issue. We have some good character work. It doesn't try to be too action-y, although we certainly do have some fight scenes. And I really, really appreciate that. I hope this signals the direction the book's going to go going forward.
I hope Monet's outfits get better, though, because this is really not acceptable.
My favorite fashion accessory she has is the, like, toothy mouths in her hands these days.
That's not exactly fashion.
You can make it fashionable.
It should be.
She could put, like, little rings on them or lipstick around her hand-mouth lips.
No, it just bothers me that someone with Monet's frame of reference and background and taste would show up at the Hellfire Club looking like she dressed herself out of Fredericks of Hollywood bridal catalog.
That's true. Saint Croix, you're better than this. You should consult with those little, like, mouths in your hands, and I'm sure the three of you can come up with something better.
Moving on to this week is All New X-Men number 13, written by Dennis Hopeless, with pencils by Mark Bagley, inks by Andrew Hennessy, and colors by Nolan Woodard. So, we were talking earlier about this, and Miles described it as kind of a hiatus from the plot, and I disagree. Because talking about it and arguing about that kind of pinpointed something I really love about Dennis Hopeless, as distinct from a lot of the other writers on the line right now, which is that he treats character-centric plot, not just adventure-centric plot, as significant plot in terms of spacing and pace and the timing in the book.
And you see so little of that these days. Everything is so go, or just so decompressed as it goes, that she's having a quieter issue that's all about character development, that's all about Bobby trying to learn to flirt in a gay dance club with the wingmen Edie and Evan with him. I never would have expected a book like this in 2016, and I'm so glad it exists.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my favorite X series focus on the character stuff and have the fights as sort of framing. We've talked about that with season 1. I think we've talked about that a lot with New Mutants.
Sure.
It's something that was actually a guiding principle of X-Men Evolution, that the B plot was secretly the A plot. That came up, I think, when we interviewed one of the folks behind the series. And yeah, this is good. This feels like that. It feels like it should, and God, it rings terrifyingly and heart-wrenchingly and adorably true.
Yeah, Hopeless can write teenagers better than, honestly, anybody since probably New Mutants Claremont.
Well, and the learning curve of coming out is something that doesn't get addressed a lot. Someone comes out and is gay or is trans or whatever, and just sort of goes into it as if they got delivered the handbook for the recently self-aware by a unicorn through the window, and now they've got all the pieces, and this has just been waiting. But I don't think that's a common experience.
And I really like specifically that when Bobby's talking about being nervous about flirting with boys, he talks about how badly it's gone when he's flirted with girls.
Yeah.
Because that's the frame of reference he has. I like that Hopeless remembers this isn't just a gay teenage character. This is Bobby Drake, who has been through this set of experiences. What would it be like for him specifically?
Well, and who, as he points out, is just aware enough of 2016 to be aware of how offensively out of date his frame of reference for gay culture is.
Right.
For instance.
Also, can we talk about how amazing Kid Apocalypse and Oya, I think is her code name, Edie, are in this?
I love them dearly, but I was kind of wincing in a lot of those scenes. They are the enthusiastic wingmen who really want to help you but don't quite listen, and also are both brilliant and sparkling and amazing. And I was thinking about this because I was reading through some of Oya's earlier experiences fairly recently, and just how much she's changed as a character, and how long that's happened over, because I was thinking of it as fairly sudden, but no, it's happened very organically over a very, very,
She's been
very
around
long
for
time.
years, yeah.
I also like that she basically brings up that they've gotten here because they both, spent a lot of time playing foil to Quentin Quire. That, you learn a certain amount about snarkiness and faked confidence from that.
Well, yeah, and the development they have seems believable. Like you mentioned about them being super, super sparkly, but honestly, they're two characters who, as much darkness as they've had, the way they've learned to deal with that, I think Oya somewhat recently in Genesis, almost since he started as a character, is by just forcing a smile, by just, smiling till they believe it. Like seeing Genesis, Kid Apocalypse, dancing like a mad person in the club and just smiling and saying, this is what it takes to make the darkness go away. That rings very, very true, especially coming right after the arc where he got super messed up about his other Apocalypse self.
Yeah, and the two of them specifically teaming up to kind of rescue Bobby and make him their project in light of their respective pasts and background. Makes a lot of sense to me too. So I want to talk about Bobby some, because this kid, he's so great. He's so absolutely fantastic.
I was so rooting for him the whole time. I was actually really invested in this issue.
Mark Bagley has a very specific specialty in comics, and that's teenagers having feelings.
Yes, he's very good at exactly that.
And that's what this issue is, and it's great. He draws these three really well. There are members of the team who are hit and miss for me, his versions of them. His Cyclops, for instance. When he's in the visor, his eyes tend to be up here, which I cannot get past. Yeah, Bagley just puts his eyes really high on his forehead a lot of the time.
I never noticed.
It throws me every time. It's really bizarre. But yeah, and there are bits that, seem clearly rushed, but this issue is just amazing fusion of writing and art, and it's lovely. And there's some superhero stuff, but there's superhero stuff that very much fits the theme of the issue, that fits Bobby trying to establish footing in a new frame of reference in something that he's kind of coming to with a dated perspective, and with a perspective that's not really rooted in either what's current or who he currently is and what he's actually trying to do. Handles that very, very deftly, introduces a character who I really hope we'll see stick around.
Based on the way the issue ends in terms of interactions with the larger Marvel Universe, I strongly suspect we will.
And does some really nice framing of the relationship between mutants and Inhumans from people who are less directly involved in the political end of that conflict.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see where this goes, but mainly I'm excited to see an issue like this here and now in 2016. So Dennis Hopeless, yes, please keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm excited that we are seeing Bobby navigate this and that he's not doing it entirely confidently. I wish we were seeing more of that from his adult counterpart. I really, really wish that.
Finally, we have Old Man Logan number 11, written by Jeff Lemire with art by Andrea Sorrentino and colors by Marcello Maiolo. So this is, once again, part of the Last Ronin story, which, by the way, the covers on these are great. I love it when a storyline has consistent covers from issue to issue, and these are just freaking gorgeous. And as a chapter in a larger story, I think it works. As a single issue, it felt really, really fast to me. I read it in about half the time it took me to read the other issues that we talked about this week.
Yeah, it's decompressed to a point that makes it a very, very rapid read.
Yeah, and part of that, I think, is that so much of the focus in Old Man Logan as a title is on Sorrentino's art. And don't get me wrong, I'm totally okay with that, because Sorrentino's art remains so wonderfully expressive and just straight up gorgeous. But it also means that not a lot really happens. I mean, we still have our usual Old Man Logan structure of some scenes in the present day with Old Man Logan and some scenes in our future Logan's past when he's younger, with him hanging out with Maureen, the woman who would become his wife. And that's cool, but there's very little of both.
Well, you can have an art-focused book that's much more narratively dense than this. The focus, I disagree with the premise that the focus on the art is what's slowing it down. It's the focus on the art and the pacing of the art and the pacing of the story. Again, there are so many other ways you can do that. I will say, Sorrentino has a ton of really, really deft tricks in action scenes that I love. I think some of those action scenes could stand to be shorter, but man, every panel of them is absolutely lovely, and I can certainly see the reluctance to cut them down at all. I would probably sit down with a 60-page book that was just a wordless Sorrentino drawn and Maiolo color, because Maiolo's colors are a vital component of this.
Kick It Shaolin Cowboy style?
Yeah.
Just one big fight?
Yeah, and I think we have to be talking about Sorrentino and Mayo in a breath when we're talking about the art, because the colors are so fundamental to what works on this book.
Absolutely. So we do get some interesting stuff. Like there's a villain named Sohei that both incarnations of Logan have faced, this sort of Japanese warrior. And him talking about, the fact that this is really Logan's story and that he's just a pawn in this story and so is Deathstrike. There's some interesting meta stuff going on there. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go, but those are some intriguing seeds to plant in a comic book. Planting seeds where you talk about narrative inside a narrative. Maybe that'll go somewhere. I kind of hope it does. But yeah, by and large, it's some really cool visuals. The plot inches forward as Logan, in his past, our future, gets closer to revealing his powers to Maureen. And in the present day, he gets in a big fight with, some ninjas, basically. But by and large, this is very much a middle chapter. I think it'll play better in trade than it does in single issue.
I am still irritated as hell about Lady Deathstrike in this. She doesn't have the sexy danger moment that bugged me last time, but she's a lamp. She is
a murder lamp?
Sure, a murder lamp, but she's a narrative object. There is nothing significant about her. There is nothing character-driven about her, and she has no agency. She's just a prop. First she's Sohei's prop, then she's Logan's prop. And she's a character who deserves so much better than that.
And I hope she gets to see it. I mean, we have a couple more chapters left still, so maybe that'll happen. That would be super rad.
But as Sohei said, it's Logan's book. So that's 3 of 3. What's our pick of the fortnight?
Definitely all new X-Men. Now, I really liked Uncanny X-Men. I think it's a huge step up in quality for the book. That seems to be the trajectory the title's on. But all new X-Men was just so satisfying. It was a way to do an issue that's so rare these days and that I miss so much. It's damn near perfectly executed, both as a chapter and an ongoing and as a standalone. Top notch.
And it's a good illustration of what we like about the title overall.
Absolutely. What about our panel of the fortnight?
Our panel comes from Old Man Logan number 11, and it is, I think, a really good example of an aspect of storytelling you don't much see, which is basically an alternative to sound effects, a way to use a twist on visual storytelling and on illustration to convey a moment of impact or sound or intensity. These great little inset panels. This happens a couple times on this page. Actually, I'm just going to show each of them because they're both great. They're on the same page. And I just think it's a really, really well done trick, and it's a really good way to get that impact without breaking up the art with sound effects.
So that's it for this week. Thanks for watching.
If you like what you've seen here but think it would be way better without our faces, check out our podcast, Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men. New episodes come out every Sunday at explainthexmen.com, also on iTunes and Stitcher. And this week we've got a special one for you.
We do indeed. Our next episode was actually recorded this past weekend at Rose City Comic Con 2016 at the Oregon Convention Center. We had Greg Pak of Extreme X-Men, Phoenix Endsong, Magneto Testament, The Storm Ongoing, a whole lot of stuff. Talk about all sorts of stuff, but specifically characters, what makes them them, what you can change, what you can't. It was a really fun discussion, also with some really fun live listener questions after. Check it out.
We should also say that since we didn't do video reviews last week, so we didn't get to lead it in, our summer special is now up. It's a tabletop role-playing game set in the world of X-Men Evolution and run once again by the amazing Logan Bonner, with Max Carlton and Crystal Fraser joining us at the gaming table. So yeah, check those out. That podcast, these video reviews, and everything at explainthexmen.com are brought to you by our Patreon subscribers. We're an entirely listener-supported project. Those are the folks who help us stay on the air ad-free and making cool stuff. If you want to join their ranks, you can do that at the link either above or below this video, depending on where you're watching it.
In the meantime, we will see you next week with a surprisingly large quantity of X-books. Take care. What are you doing?
Dude, I can see myself in my sunglasses. This is getting into some sort of cream of wheat box territory. Oh my god, there are like 4 of me now.
It extends into infinity.